we'd like to turn over to Miles Tufft, who will be talking about creating social context online. Miles, your mic is muted still. There we go, mate.
Thank you very much, Joe. Can you all hear me? That's great. Sorry, I had a few technical issues there. Getting my slides up, but here I am. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for that introduction, Joe. Yes, so my name is Miles Tufft. I am a third-year PhD student working in the Eyethink lab at UCL. And I'm here today to talk to you about creating social context online. And principally, I'm here to talk a little bit about how we can create this sort of minimal social context in an online environment and get participants to believe that they're working with someone online when they're not necessarily are. And everything that I'm going to show you today is entirely possible in Gorilla, on the Gorilla platform, and it can hopefully give you some inspiration and show you some ideas of what we've come up with in sort of the challenge in transitioning our lab experiments to an online environment. So if I start off by talking a little bit about what we're interested in our lab, primarily we're interested in the way that cognition is shaped by social context. And in the lab, we are investigating this by looking at cognitive interference paradigms. And these paradigms lend themselves quite nicely to the studying of social context because they are naturally able to be split between two people. And we have this hypothesis in the lab that perhaps we could turn off interference or offload interference if the source of interference is being taken care of by someone else. So if I just show you an example here, this is basically what my PhD has been focused on for the last 2 or 3 years, this very simple paradigm called the picture-word paradigm. And here what you can see is pictures and words being presented on the screen. And what participants have to do is they have to either, categorize the picture as either having a vowel or a consonant as the last letter. And what you find is that people are slightly slower when the word on top is semantically related to the picture. So here in this case, zebra and buffalo are semantically related. You're slightly slower to do that task than you would do if the word was table. And this is a very robust effect that has been detailed in the literature for many, many years. And we thought that, well, what if we brought people into a lab and we split the task up? So we had two conditions, a social and a non-social condition. Whereby you'd split the responsibility. So in the social condition I explained first on the right-hand side, you get people in the lab, the participant would meet a confederate, and the participant would be in charge of the picture, and the confederate in charge of the word. Whereas in the non-social condition, the participant would just do the task normally. And our hypothesis was that when the word is taken care of, we believe that perhaps the word could be offloaded to the other person, and that will be picked up in a reduction interference. Now, don't worry too much if you're not following so much on the theory behind the experiment. Really, what I want to focus on here is some of the methods that we adopted in order to try and create this ruse, and how we transition that online. So what we found in the basic result is that when you bring people into the lab and you get them to work together in the dyad condition and you get a participant to work with a confederate that looks after the word, you find that actually interference is removed. So here on the graph on the left-hand side, you can see in the alone condition, when they're working on their own, you get a very robust interference effect of about 38 milliseconds. They're 38 milliseconds slower on the related trials versus the unrelated trials. But when working together with someone else and you just tell them simply that that other person is looking after the word, they're doing something on the word, that interference effect is removed. And we were very excited about this result, and we framed it as social offloading, as I mentioned, which is the offloading of interference to another person. Now, even back in November, we were considering to try and transition this experiment online. The reason we were doing that is there's so many opportunities online to collect data so much quicker. As Gwen was mentioning, it would take us around about 2 to 3 weeks to collect data for a study like this with 40, 45 participants, but online we could conduct it and collect data overnight. So we approached Gorilla back in November and asked Gorilla whether we could develop a tool which allowed us to turn on the webcam of people at their home. So this allowed us to do something like this, whereby we can create a scenario where this is me, my webcam's turned on, and I can see myself, and then suddenly we can get them to meet someone else. And this is just a video of a confederate, but as that confederate waves at you, you get that sudden feeling that you're connected with someone else. And so we use this potentially as a replacement for the lab-based connection where they would meet a confederate to have something online. So they would enter into a game, they would meet someone online, and they would feel this sense of connection, and it was increased in believability by having their webcam on at the same time. So what we did is we framed our experiment, we transitioned it online, we had the same PWI experiment of the pictures and the words, but this time the participant was sat there in their home believing that they were being live streamed with someone else. They were in charge of the picture, whereas someone else was somewhere else in the online environment and they were in charge of the word. And what we found when we just framed the experiment in this way was we got broadly a similar shape of result. Although it didn't reach acceptable levels of significance, we were seeing that in the alone condition, we were still getting this robust interference effect of about 25 milliseconds, and it was reducing down to about 9 milliseconds, but this didn't quite reach significance. But it gave us a little bit of confidence that perhaps we were moving in the right direction. Joe mentioned earlier about piloting studies. What you find is you have so many different iterations where you tweak different things here and there, and then until you find that you're moving closer to where you want to be. So we went back to the drawing board a little bit, and this is one of the main bit that I want to share in terms of our reflections. We came up with 4 possible approaches in thinking about turning up the social dial. So we'd already basically nudged us in the right direction, but we wanted to turn the social dial up even further and really ramp up that believability that the people were working with someone online. And the way we thought about this is breaking it down into 4 steps. The first step, which is something we already began doing, which is to create this believability that you are working with someone online, that there's really someone there. But then we felt that you really had to make that presence meaningful in some way, that we're sharing in doing something. It could be a form of interaction, or it could be just a sense of shared attention, or so forth like that. While at the same time, after that, we thought, well, if you think about the online environment, it's a very weird environment. It's highly decontextualized. As soon as you turn your camera off, or you move your screen, or you check your email, you suddenly find that that person who is in your world is suddenly gone. And they make you realize how much you get for free in the lab, that that person is there sat next to you and they ain't going anywhere, and that you just assume and you just know. But here in the social world, if they're not on the screen, they're not with you. And we were very concerned about this. So we had to try and maintain the sense of social cues throughout the experiment. And I'll show you how we did that. And the 4th one are a few points around efficient design, because we're asking a lot of our participants to remember the fact that they are actually in a social context in an online environment. Whereas in the lab, again, you get quite a lot for free because, of course, the confederate is blatantly there, and therefore you feel that you're in a social context. So if I just show you, again, just a few examples of what we've done. Again, all of this is designed in Gorilla, and this is an experiment that we're just about to run now. We refined this idea of meeting someone online. So this, we refined the picture word game, and we gave people a choice, and this is just a video of them choosing Picture Master. And then we get the sense that they're connecting in some way to some form of game server. And you can see in the top left-hand corner, we've just created now avatars, leveraging familiar online platforms like WhatsApp to give you that sense that you're connecting online and you're actually really connecting to a game. Just to remind you, they're not connecting to anyone here. They're just on their own. We're just pretending. And so you can hear that they're finding someone else online. We call them the word master because they're looking after the word. The word master is now connecting. They're really not. They come online. And now you get that sense that you're both online. We want to meet them. So here's me again. My camera suddenly turns on. I'm like, whoa, there I am. And then I meet someone else and that person waves and you get a real sense that you're connecting with that person. So that's point 1, which is forming that sort of meet. But then we wanted to create a sense of meaningful connection. So we came up with this solution here. And of course, there are multiple solutions to these issues of creating a shared screen. So like I'm doing right now in Zoom, sharing my screen, we sort of give this impression that we're syncing the screens. And as well as that, because we're syncing the screens, we now can have this idea where we've got shared typing. And on the right-hand side, we've got the confederate linked up, and the experimenter may go and record it. Please type in hello, and then they type in hello. Of course, this is all pre-recorded, but again, it's just building that sense that you're sharing someone else, that person really is there. You're building the slow building blocks of these minimal social contexts and really getting them to be in a sense that they're involved in something together with someone else. And this goes on, so we can say, could you delete hello, and could you actually type in wordmaster? You're talking to the confederate here that doesn't exist. They type in wordmaster. Oh, and uppercase, please, not in lowercase. They delete it, and then they type in uppercase. And all this time, the participant's watching. You say, hit return and enter into the game. And the wordmaster will hit return, and at some point, it will start loading them into the game. And then we have this cool little trick where we actually then transitioned that video of them being connected, the live feed, to their actual avatar. And here you then type in picture master yourself, the participant types in picture master, and then lo and behold, they connect to their own live feed. And then there's a countdown into the game. So again, we're just building up this sense of social, minimal social context. And of course, now you can see throughout the game, you now have the social pixels, because you now, rather than just having the game, you now have things that represent social connection between the two people. Shared screen, and also the avatars. Just a very quick note on efficient design. We can talk more about this in the social corner, where we felt that you're asking a lot for participants, so we've tried to keep our trials as short as possible. We only have 64 trials per condition, 32 trials per block, and then we block them up, and then you have this reminder screen between blocks that you're still connected with someone else. Again, just trying to keep that sense of connection between the two, because you're dealing with a very decontextualized environment. So just to wrap up very quickly, that was a very quick whistle-stop tour around some of the things that we're doing, some of the solutions that we've come up with. I just want to emphasize the point that in seeing the transition from lab to online, it can seem like a challenge, but we've actually found these as excellent opportunities to actually extend our research beyond the four walls of the lab. We really feel that the online environment provides a real great opportunity for us to collect good data. And the way we're making sure and confident that we're collecting good data is we've got a baseline. We've got that lab baseline, and we're trying to compare what we're getting online to that lab baseline, and to give us confidence that we're really tapping into the same underlying mechanisms. Online is not a unique space. It's actually a space in which we can actually tap into and collect good, efficient sources of data. So I thank you. I think I've got a thank you slide at the end for your attention, and thank you for the acknowledgements there in the right corner. Thank you very much.
Great job, Miles. Thanks very much. It's clear that you are both clever and tricky. I love the level of social deception that you bring to online experiments. In fact, it reminded me, you know, at some level, social cognitive neuroscience does similar things with things like brain scanners, where again, it's an individual setting. But if you're trying to measure brain responses to a social interaction, you've got to do this kind of gamesmanship, as it were, to just sort of get people to believe that they're interacting with a confederate in some way. Did you guys make any explicit ties to some of these other paradigms where they're trying to be deceptive and create a social context, or is this all work that you guys did independently and developed yourselves?
This is all work that we've actually developed independently ourselves. I mean, we had that challenge firstly in the lab. We just you know, for practicality point of views, we wanted to run it with a confederate. So we were like, how do we get people to believe that they're connected with someone else? So we came up already a year ago with a number of different ideas. And because of Gorilla and the platform of Gorilla, it's just very easy to then transition that into an online environment.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully you can see that these kind of methods would, you know, also then work using these kind of online environments in something like a scanner for those of us who are interested in sort of the neural responses as well.